At our 8-year anniversary party, in front of about 20 guests, my husband looked at me and shouted, "Apologize to her or get out." He was sure I would cry and beg, but I stood up, calmly walked over, looked him straight in the eye, and said one single sentence, the one that would take both him and his mistress down in flames. If you're hearing this, hit subscribe right now, because the drama is about to be messier than your worst leg day. And leave me a comment. If it were you, standing in the middle of that party, how would you have responded? I'm Lauren Caldwell, a divorce and estate attorney for the ultra-wealthy of Greenwich that night, wearing pajamas, hair messily tied in a top knot, standing in the kitchen cleaning up my husband's pile of protein shake containers. Blake walked in, sweat still damp around his collar, shaking a blender bottle filled with something green that looked like blended lawn. He looked proud of himself. "Babe," he started, in that tone men use when they think they're making a very serious life decision. "I've been thinking, we should get a home gym. It'd be way more efficient for Kenna to train me here. She says I need a space to focus, without distractions." He said Kenna needs space to train, like he was talking about rearranging the living room furniture, not, you know, bringing his flirty young fitness coach into our house and handing her a key. I set down the dish towel and stared at him a beat longer than usual. To an outsider, that might have sounded like a commitment to better health. But I'm a lawyer trained to read the fine print. And what I heard was the opening clause of a marital coup, dressed up in dumbbells, yoga mats, and "it's good for me" excuses. I nodded, smiled sweetly, and quietly filed the receipt. $5,200 per month for private training. Then $8,000 for supplement stacks. From that moment on, I started sorting the signs like case files. Blake, the same guy who used to lounge on the couch all night watching football, who said gym smelled like sweat and ego, was now suddenly working out 7 days a week, constantly checking in, taking mirror selfies with captions like, "Grind never stops." Blake, the guy who once said green smoothies looked like floor cleaner, was now talking about kale, protein, macros, calorie deficits like a nutritionist. Blake, who used to avoid business trips like the plague, was now suddenly invited to attend financial seminars at strange places, Canyon Ranch Lenox, reconnection retreats, cities that don't show up on any real finance conference calendar I know. He wasn't good at hiding. He just hoped I wasn't looking. Unfortunately for him, looking closely is what I do for a living. Like when he wore his new Apple Watch to breakfast and forgot to disable the preview banner that said, "Can I come over tonight?" "I miss your muscles' hearts," flashing right across the screen. When I confronted him, he replied with that TED Talk voice Kenna probably coached him on. "Kenna's helping me reach the highest version of myself, babe. This is a holistic wellness journey." I almost spit coffee in his face. A married man's wellness journey involves being turned on by a 27-year-old trainer. From then on, every time he said things like personal growth, clean living, or listening to my body, I'd smile politely while mentally translating it to his fitness journey was just a new costume for a very old story. Men getting seduced by another woman, then lying to themselves that it's about health and healing, not ego and hormones. Kenna knew exactly what words to use. She didn't say, "You make me happy." She said, "You're doing what's best for you." Men like Blake melt for that kind of thing. But what Blake didn't know is that by that point, I'd already started fighting back. Not with tears, not with shouting matches at midnight, but with organized silence. He assumed that if I found out, I'd break down, cling to him, beg him to choose our family. He forgot that I didn't come into his life empty-handed. I had a career. I had networks. I had legal knowledge. And most importantly, I never act without having all the information. He thought he was playing a secret chess game behind my back. He didn't know whose table the board was sitting on. I remember so clearly one dinner early in my career. My father, a retired attorney himself, sat across from me and pointed at the stack of case files I had brought home. He said, "Knowing something is one thing. Knowing when to use it, that's wisdom. You don't always play your strongest piece first. Sometimes you let people show a few more of their bad moves. That line stuck in my head like a clause that never expires. The night Blake bragged about the private gym with Kenna, I heard it again, and I decided I wouldn't argue. I would investigate. I'd let him believe he was in charge of the story, while I quietly gathered every piece of the truth. Everything truly exploded in my head one late September evening, when Blake came home reeking of strawberry pre-workout and sweat, rambling about increasing his 1 RM deadlift and waking up hamstrings that had been asleep for 42 years. If I were a normal wife, maybe I would have assumed my husband was going through a midlife crisis or dealing with some work stress, gym obsession, smoothies, cheap self-help quotes. But I'm not that kind of wife. I'm Lauren Caldwell, the kind of woman who can spot a lie even when it's wrapped in whey protein and a muscle tank. And the first red flag didn't come from Blake. It came from Kenna, the personal trainer he called his close friend. Kenna claimed to live a minimalist lifestyle, not materialistic, focused on wellness. But her wardrobe was full of limited edition workout sets, training shoes that cost as much as office rent, the latest generation smartwatch, a shiny white BMW, and a steady stream of muscle growth, recovery, detox retreats at five-star resorts. Her social media page looked like a catalog for some luxury fitness brand, lifting weights on the beach, squatting by an infinity pool, running along cliffside trails. All so staged it felt fake, but the real discovery was on her personal website, in the private client testimonials section. 4 long emotional reviews, written like love letters. Declan Whitaker, a cardiologist in Greenwich Mason Harrington, owner of a car dealership chain in Darien. Grayson, hedge fund manager in Old Greenwich. And Blake, my husband, who thought he was her special client. What do wealthy, insecure men all have in common? They think they're unique. But really, they're so similar you could swap the names and reuse the same script. Winters, my best friend for years, also a private investigator. And I dug deeper. And when we dug, everything spilled out like a garbage can kicked over. Kenna Rivers turned out to be a fake name. Her real identity was Marissa Reyes. For the past 3 years, she had been posing as a personal trainer, wellness advisor, fitness guru, scamming wealthy men for both love and money. Her schedule was a thing of twisted brilliance, impressive to both trainers and con artists alike. Her calendar looked better than any gym bro's PR chart. Mondays and Wednesdays. Declan, his wife, thought he was recovering from a heart scare Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mason, his wife believed he was in grief counseling after losing his father. Fridays and Sundays, Grayson, who swore he was doing a financial detox program. And from Monday to Sunday, Blake, the man who believed he was the exception, the one she truly loved. He got the slots right after the other 3 had finished. It sounds like a bad joke, but every part was real. Each of those men was unknowingly funding her luxury lifestyle, like investors in a scam startup. Declan covered the $15,000 per month rent for a private gym suite in Tribeca. Mason paid for the white BMW. Grayson funded all the luxury retreats. And Blake, my husband, paid the rent on her upscale apartment, the one she called the recovery suite, where all 4 men were welcomed. In separate time slots, the most cunning part? Marissa never told the same story to 2 men. To Declan, she was a survivor of domestic abuse. To Mason, she was drowning in unpaid student debt. To Grayson, her family was in crisis and needed urgent help. To Blake, I just want to help you achieve your dream body. You're the best man I've ever coached. It all revolved around one motif. I need you to save me. You're the hero of my life. Not because she was weak, but because men like them love being someone's hero. I sat there, staring at my laptop screen, glass of red wine in hand, shaking my head in reluctant awe. Marissa had turned scamming wealthy husbands into a full-scale one-on-one coaching program, complete with color-coded calendars and a Google sheet that categorized Most effective emotional manipulation techniques per client. Winters spoke up. We're not just dealing with a cheater. This is a precision built con operation, tailor made for each type of man she targets. But she made one fatal mistake, I replied. Marissa's fatal mistake began the exact moment she thought she had already won. A smart con artist knows when to walk away while things still look good. But Marissa didn't. She got greedy, overly confident, and started dreaming up long-term plans, like pushing Blake to divorce me so she could move in and take care of him full-time. It sounds almost touching if you ignore one tiny detail. She had no idea. That house was never in Blake's name. It was owned by Caldwell Property Holdings, LLC, a company I established 6 years ago when we bought the house using inheritance money from my family. Every ownership record, every legal document, every purchase agreement was signed by me. Not a single line bore Blake's name. And of course, Marissa never checked. That was the moment I decided. It was time to raise the curtain on this entire performance. I opened my laptop, logged into the secure email account I only used for critical cases. I drafted one email, short, sharp, but powerful enough to alter the lives of at least 4 women. I attached all the evidence: messages, intimate photos, private training schedules, wire transfer records, everything that, with a single glance, any wife would instantly recognize as betrayal. I typed the subject line, "About Kenna, the woman our husbands are funding." Then I wrote the opening line, each word slicing across the screen like a blade on glass. "We have something in common. It's time we talked about Kenna, or rather, Marissa Reyes." Below that, I inserted 4 images: Declan hugging her in the gym, Mason handing her the keys to the white BMW, Grayson kissing her in a hotel elevator, and Blake, my husband, holding her gym bag like a dutiful assistant, photos no wife could misinterpret. I leaned back in my chair, watching the text appear, my fingers moving across the keyboard like I was playing a solo concerto, with 3 powerful women as my unseen audience, each betrayed just like me. Then I hit send, calmly, precisely, without a single tremble. The fact that 3 wives in 3 different cities would receive the same evidence at the exact same time. I don't know whether to call it art or science. All I know is that the law of chaos itself would have to bow before the combined wrath of 3 wealthy, intelligent women who'd all just realized they were conned by the same budget personal trainer. I pressed send at exactly 6:47 p.m. Friday evening, the perfect time to destroy Marissa's weekend plans. Winters found it poetic and perfectly vicious. Less than 15 minutes after I hit send, my phone started vibrating nonstop like someone was trying to punch through the table. The first call came from Patricia, Declan's wife. Her voice was so cold it could slice the air in half. "I got your email. Mrs. Caldwell, are you absolutely sure about everything you sent me?" I replied slowly, clearly. "I'm a lawyer. I don't make accusations. I present evidence." Open the email again. Timestamps, financial transactions, original photos. It's enough to convince even the most skeptical jury. The second call came from Vanessa, Mason's wife. I could tell by her voice she was gritting her teeth, probably clutching a kitchen knife, just to stop her hands from shaking. "How long have you known about this?" she asked. "I've been actively tracking for 3 weeks," I answered. "But I noticed signs more than 6 weeks ago. Your husband's grief therapy appointments have a very consistent schedule, Mrs. Harrison." Not a full minute later, Eleanor, Grayson's wife, called too. And within moments, all 3 women demanded we open a group call. And believe me, listening to 3 wealthy, razor-sharp, powerful wives simultaneously realize they'd all been played by the same cheap con artist felt like attending a perfectly orchestrated symphony of rage. These were not bored housewives. Patricia used to be a prosecutor. Vanessa runs a marketing firm. Eleanor has an MBA from Wharton. In other words, Marissa picked the wrong enemies. I sat down, calm and steady, and said, "I suggest we handle this with the level of precision it deserves. Interested in teaming up?" Their enthusiasm was so electric, I swear it could have powered half the eastern seaboard. By 8 p.m., we had a group chat any crisis strategy team would envy. Patricia took over legal. She flat out said Marissa's actions qualified as fraud, impersonation, and multi-state tax evasion. Vanessa led the media war, digging through social platforms, fake reviews, staged posts. Eleanor traced the money trail using financial connections I wasn't even qualified to fully understand. And me, I was the conductor of this entire justice symphony, while also preparing to welcome a very special guest Blake had foolishly invited to our anniversary party. Blake had invited Kenna to our 8-year wedding anniversary party that night. He said he wanted it to be more intimate with close friends. Funny, because I'd also personally sent invitations to my 3 new friends, along with their husbands. All of them accepted, faster than I expected. Meanwhile, Marissa was speeding toward my house, fully convinced she was about to celebrate her freedom with the man who had just left his wife for her. Blake was visibly on edge all afternoon. He paced around, trying to hide his nerves, especially when I casually listed the guests I'd invited: Declan, Mason, and Grayson. He froze for half a beat, but I just kept adjusting my dress, pretending not to notice a thing. "Sweetheart, I just want tonight to feel festive. You don't mind, do you?" I could practically hear him swallowing in fear behind the door. About an hour before the party, my phone buzzed nonstop with updates from the 3 wives. Patricia messaged, "She just deleted all her social media accounts." Vanessa wrote, "Withdrew a large amount of cash within the past hour." Eleanor sent a screenshot. "Emergency filings submitted to the fraud divisions of 3 counties. Tonight's going to be fun." And one more detail. Each of their husbands had just received the exact same message from Kenna. "Family emergency. I have to go home. Love you." 3 men, 3 stories. 1 recycled lie. Marissa was thrilled about her new chapter, but still clinging to the same old script to keep her bait on the hook. 8:45 p.m. The familiar sound of a white BMW's engine pulled up outside the house. I looked out the bedroom window. Kenna stepped out, holding a bag of organic groceries from Erewhon in one hand, a few diptyque candles in the other, wearing an overpriced skin-tight workout set, and a smile that screamed, "The new lady of the house has arrived." I typed into the group chat, "Tonight's star has arrived." 3 replies came in almost simultaneously. "Ready? Let's do this. End this play." From downstairs came the sound of the door opening, and Kenna's voice, sweet as strawberry protein shake. "Blake, honey, I brought some healthy food to celebrate. Tonight we officially start our new life together." I heard Blake rushing down like a dog off leash, his voice stumbling. "Don't say stuff like that. Lauren will get the wrong idea. You're just here for my training session." He tried to say it loud enough for me to hear. Kenna giggled. "It's fine, honey. She's leaving tomorrow, unless you're not planning to keep your promise." That kind of shamelessness was almost admirable. I closed my laptop, smoothed the black silk dress, checked my red lipstick in the mirror. One final message to the group chat. "Showtime, ladies. Hope you're watching live." I walked down the stairs like entering a courtroom where I already knew the verdict. Kenna was wrapping her arm around Blake's waist, her eyes glittering as she scanned the granite kitchen island, probably imagining where to place her cold-pressed juicer. On the counter sat catered dishes, kale salad, and the scented candles I had bought from Old Greenwich. Flickering softly, she had even added a fresh bouquet, no doubt from the most expensive florist in town. Everything had been carefully set up to celebrate my departure from my own home, even as she knew this was the anniversary of my marriage to Blake. The party that night had only about 20 people. Blake's friends, a few of his coworkers, a few neighbor couples. Warm yellow lights, wine glasses clinking softly, laughter filling the living room, as if everything in our lives were perfectly in place. I stood by the buffet table, pouring more water into my glass. But inside, I was waiting for a storm I knew was coming. Midway through the party, I saw Kenna signal to Blake, just a small tilt of her head, a quick glance, her finger tapping the rim of her glass like she was counting beats. Blake understood instantly. He set down his whiskey, straightened his posture. Watching them felt like watching a terrible play, where the two main actors believed they were the stars. And I was the unwilling audience. Kenna, or rather Marissa, set her wine glass down on the oak table with a soft click, just loud enough to draw attention. She wore a tiny black bodycon dress, her six-pack abs tightening every time she breathed, her hair in a high bun, showing off her neck and diamond earrings, the same earrings I knew Grayson had given her last month for her birthday. She turned, placed her hand on Blake's shoulder like she was staking her claim, then raised her voice just enough for the entire long table to hear, "Lauren." She smiled with that pitying expression. "I really admire you. Having a husband who provides everything like Blake. Not everyone is lucky enough to stay home and still live comfortably like you." The entire room went silent. The ticking of the Swiss clock on the wall suddenly sounded loud enough for everyone to hear. I saw every reaction clearly. Blake's best friend's mouth falling open. The neighbor who had just lifted a bite of Wagyu beef suddenly forgetting to chew. I gently placed my glass down. No one noticed the motion, but I heard the ice knock against the sides, each tap like a finger against my sternum. Blake panicked. He cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, glanced at me, and then looked away like a child caught doing something wrong but still trying to act composed. In that moment, I realized he had told her I was just a housewife with no job. He had erased everything I'd built, the trials I'd worked on, the contracts I'd drafted, the nights I'd stayed up working, and he did it so he could look more impressive to a con artist. "Oh, my husband told you I'm a housewife?" I said softly, but everyone heard because they were all holding their breath. "Well, that's interesting, but I don't need him to fund my luxury lifestyle. Unlike you." Blake slammed the table, his voice dripping with anger and fake authority. "Lauren, you're insulting my friend. Apologize to her or get out." We locked eyes, like two wolves watching their opponent. One wrong move, and the other would strike. Marissa ignored the ice-cold tension between us and kept talking, her voice sweet as honey but poisonous underneath. "Tomorrow I'm moving into our home. I want to set everything up myself, so Blake has a proper space to train and unwind after work. Our new home, the house that is legally mine, the house bought with my family's inheritance. The house she was standing in, smelling the candles I bought, placing her bouquet on my kitchen island, thinking she just had to pull Blake's strings hard enough to claim it. I looked at Marissa, her perfect curls, the tight dress making her look like she stepped straight out of a fashion catalog, the confidence in her smile so delusional it was almost sad. She really believed she had won. That I was the gentle loser quietly exiting Blake's life. That tonight was her victory celebration. I took a slow breath, then turned to look at Marissa, steady, direct, without a single tremor. Outside the window, headlights swept across the curtains. 3 cars, 3 women. 3 names Marissa thought she could rotate like a game. And then, the living room door swung open. A silhouette stepped inside. Patricia, Declan's wife. Then a second figure, Vanessa, Mason's wife. Then a third, Eleanor, Grayson's wife. Each of them walked in carrying a thick red folder with their husband's name printed in bold on the cover. It looked like they were carrying bound death sentences. I just smiled. No arguing, no raised voice like they might have expected. I placed my napkin gently on the table, tilted my head slightly, and said, very clearly, very calmly, "Kenna, personal trainer or my husband's mistress?" I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and added, "And these are wives just like me, and they're very eager to meet you, Kenna." The sound seemed to vanish from the room, like someone had sucked out all the oxygen. Half the guests snapped their heads toward Blake. The other half stared at Kenna. She froze, fingers gripping the edge of the table. Blake stood paralyzed, face blank. "Lauren, what are you talking about?" he stammered. "I don't know what game you're playing, Lauren." She tried to sound firm, but the sugary personal trainer tone had completely vanished, replaced by something thin and deflated, like a punctured tire. Blake said you might cause a scene. A scene? I laughed, loud and sharp, the sound echoing through the dining room like a gunshot. Oh, honey, I haven't even started yet. And right on cue, the doorbell rang. The three men, Declan, Mason, Grayson, walked in, faces taut like stretched wires. They had all received messages from their wives, but none of them knew they'd be walking into this. The air went thick, so dense it felt like one deep breath could shatter it. Patricia stepped forward, opened her folder, her voice ringing through the room. We've filed reports of fraud, submitted documents to the IRS and to the State Attorney General's office. And yes, they're very interested. She said it without looking at Marissa, without even glancing at me. Patricia stared straight at her husband. Declan looked like he'd just swallowed an ice cube. Vanessa didn't waste words. She pointed directly at Blake. Your girlfriend had 4 men funding her for. You're not special. A small gasp rippled through the dinner table. Blake stood frozen, lips pressed tight, his face drained of color. Then the wives, one by one, opened their folders, their voices steady, clear, unshaken. Declan thought she was recovering from an abusive ex. He paid her studio rent every month. Mason believed she was drowning in student debt. She used him to pay off her BMW. Grayson thought she needed emotional healing after a family tragedy. He covered all her weekend retreats. And you, Blake, thought you were helping her build her training career. In truth, the 4 of you were just funding a very expensive lifestyle. When the 3 women finished, the 3 men stood frozen. None of them could argue. They couldn't look at each other or at their wives. And Kenna, she stood in the middle of the room, pale, lips turning purple, knees trembling inside those $900 heels. And that, my friends, was only minute 5 of the first half. Kenna began inching backward toward the door, each tiny step looking like a thief who just realized the security camera was pointed straight at her face. Her hand clutched her purse, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. I took 1 step forward, light enough not to startle anyone, firm enough to block every exit she thought she had. In a hurry, Kenna? I asked, my voice so sweet it could have dripped honey onto the floor. Before you go, there's one small detail you should know. Then I turned fully toward the 20 guests, raised my voice just enough so no one could miss a single syllable. This house, the house you're planning to move into tomorrow, is under my name. Bought with my inheritance, only my name on the deed. Blake has 0 ownership of this property, not a line. Not a lien. Nothing. She lifted her head slowly, like a horror movie character, realizing the monster was behind her all along, her face bleaching white like a wax figure left too close to a heater. What? What do you mean? She whispered. I studied her cracking expression, savoring each second. I mean that even if Blake divorced me, he wouldn't have the right to give you a single brick. You seduced a man just to win yourself, a house he doesn't even own. The room went so silent I could hear the ticking of the clock and the frantic heartbeat of at least 3 husbands. Blake swallowed hard. You knew all this. For how long? I shrugged. Since before you even knew how to hold a dumbbell correctly. Patricia, the former prosecutor, still holding her red folder, spoke up, her voice cold and sharp enough to slice glass. Marissa Reyes will be dealing with federal authorities. This is multi-state fraud, financial violations, unlawful payments, and identity misrepresentation. This isn't just infidelity. A few guests inhaled sharply, like they were watching a car crash but couldn't look away. And instantly, Marissa collapsed completely. She burst into tears, makeup running, trying to speak between broken breaths. I didn't mean to. I needed money. My mom is sick. I'll tell the truth. I'll tell everything. But no one believed her. No one wanted to listen. The 3 wives stood with arms crossed, the The three husbands bowed their heads in shame, and Blake looked like he had forgotten how human language worked. I had heard enough tragic backstories in the last 3 months to write a 50-episode soap opera. I looked straight at her, my voice barely above a whisper, yet everyone heard it clearly. Kenna, or Marissa, the door is behind you. I suggest you leave my home before I add trespassing to your file. She ran. Her high heels caught on the pavement, and she stumbled in the driveway, her purse exploding across the ground. Protein bars and Tom Ford lipstick scattering everywhere, she scrambled into the white BMW. The car Mason stared at, frozen like a statue. Because yes, he was the one who'd paid for it. The engine roared, the tires screeched, leaving a black streak on the asphalt and a sharp smell of burnt rubber, like the last scraps of her dignity going up in smoke. And I just smiled, lifted my champagne glass, and said, "Happy 8th anniversary, everyone. The main course has just been served." After the guests slowly trickled out, Blake stood in the middle of the living room, like a man who just lost the map to his own life. He looked at me, trembling, voice hoarse. 8 years! And you knew everything and said nothing? I blew out the candles Kenna had lit, one by one, slowly, deliberately, then answered, soft but sharp, like the glide of a thin blade. Knowledge is a weapon, Blake, and a weapon only works when used at the right time. My father used to say, in law and in revenge, timing is everything. The most poetic moment is when the betrayer realizes he gave up a wife who's a lawyer, who owns real estate across Greenwich, for a scammer with a training schedule more packed than the NBA playoffs. Blake couldn't respond. He just stared at me, like he was trying to piece together fragments of memory he'd smashed with his own hands. My phone kept buzzing. The four-woman group chat, Patricia reported that another federal prosecutor had shown interest in opening a case. Vanessa uncovered 2 more victims in Darien. Both had been drained by Marissa, with nearly identical sob stories. Eleanor sent a summary. Over 40 suspicious transactions, crossing state lines, the kind of numbers that make the IRS assign a task force. I glanced over at Blake. He didn't know this nightmare was just beginning. And just as expected, by the next morning, the fallout had already rippled through Greenwich's elite. Declan Whitaker's clinic was scrambling to manage a media crisis after Patricia accidentally leaked the story to a former colleague. Mason Harrington's dealerships were getting subtle questions from clients about his weekly grief therapy sessions. Grayson Mitchell quietly filed for extended leave from his fund, while Eleanor reviewed divorce papers, requested full custody, and looped in a tax attorney. All 3 men bowed their heads before their wives. None dared pretend they were innocent. As for Blake, poor Blake learned the hard way that being 4th in a scam trainer's rotation isn't exactly a resume highlight. Word spread so fast that even his former clients began texting him. "So, how's that Legs Day program working out for you?" Blake filed for divorce that same week, trying to salvage what little pride he had left. But then he discovered the bitter truth. Everything, from the 7-figure Greenwich home to the liquid assets, was in my name or my family's, protected by LLCs and inheritance structures. In the division of property, he had nothing to claim, nothing to bargain with, nothing to trade. His position was so weak, it was like a house built on sand. One wave, and it was all gone. 3 months later, I wake up every morning in the same big house that once felt heavy, like a constant reminder of everything I'd had to endure. But now it feels light. Like the first breath of the day, I still make the same cup of coffee, still lean my elbow on the old walnut window frame. But for the first time in years, I can smell the coffee more clearly than the anxiety. The morning light pouring through the window no longer shines on a decaying marriage. It shines on me, a woman learning how to live for herself again. In the corner of the backyard, the neglected potted plants have begun to sprout new leaves, small, but enough to remind me that even the forgotten can come back to life. Blake, on the other hand, moved into a tiny studio near the train station, where he has to push two tables together just to fit his work laptop. And he's been trying to gather the pieces of his dignity that were blown all over the place that night. People say he's often seen at the bar down the block, no longer bragging about his fitness journey, no longer confidently talking about the new version of himself. He just quietly says he needs a fresh start. I don't feel triumphant, and I don't feel sorry. I simply understand now. We all have to take responsibility for the road we choose to walk. Marissa wasn't as lucky. She was prosecuted in 3 different states. The tax bills she once ignored have become the fire that burned through every polished mask she'd spent years building. I read about her court hearing on a quiet afternoon, sunlight falling across my phone screen, and I just exhaled. Not happy, not sad, just inevitable. Greenwich eventually calmed down. The gossip faded like ripples on a lake after a gust of wind. They say Blake left the city, moved somewhere no one knows the old story, when no one calls him the fourth man in the Marissa mess. Maybe he hopes that in a new place, memories will fade faster. As for me, I didn't ruin anyone's life, didn't get revenge with some cruel cinematic strike. I simply brought everything into the light and let the truth do the rest. When light is strong enough, the dark pulls back on its own. When truth is clear enough, no one needs you to say more. Out of the wreckage, the most beautiful thing I gained was 3 women who stood beside me when I thought I was most alone. To Patricia, sharp, intelligent, never flinching from the truth. Vanessa, quick, strategic, able to read social media like a novel. Eleanor, calm, grounded, and strong in ways that don't need anyone's approval. We met because of betrayal, but stayed because of honesty and mutual respect. They weren't just allies. They were proof that when women stand together, we're much harder to fool. Now every morning, I step out onto my porch, coffee in hand, and watch the sunlight fall into my garden. My heart so light I can hear the breeze threading through the leaves. I've learned to find joy in the small things. Birds on the roof, the scent of pine warming in the sun, my shadow stretching long across the steps. I no longer have to shrink myself so someone else can feel bigger. I am me, whole, at peace, and no longer owing anyone an explanation. If you've stayed with me until this very moment, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. What part of the story gave you the most satisfaction? And, if it were you, what would you do when the truth burst into light right in your own home?